folks, it's Nick here. I thought it might be nice to think a little bit about why the habitats of Penwith look like they do, and I thought I'd start off by talking to you a little bit about something somebody once said to me, which is the answer lies in the soil. And he was talking about gardening and why his vegetables weren't growing or something like that, but it's a very true thing. I think it helps us understand why Penwith looks the way it does. So we haven't got many trees here. That's something that's immediately apparent, and we'll talk about that in a minute. We also have a very distinctive range of plant species, particularly up on the higher bits of land in Penwith. So what would you call this sort of land? Some people call it Heath because there's heather around, which is pretty reasonable, and other people call it moorland. In fact, we talk about the moors of Penwith. I'm on the Penwith moors right now. So is it Heath or is it moor? Well, if you look it up and look up what moorland is, it says moorland, or depending on where you look, often you find that moorland is high up above 300 metres. So I think what they're kind of talking about there is perhaps the Scottish Highlands, and we're not above 300 metres here. We're about half that, lower than that. So if you look up Heathland, it says dry and sandy, lowland heath they talk about. And so lowland heath is the kind of habitat you get in places like Hampshire and Dorset, that very distinctive sandy heathers, gorse, Scots pine, that kind of habitat. So what is the habitat like here? Well, let's have a little look more closely at the soil. So if we crouch down, sorry to spin you round a bit there, the soil is very dark, very peaty, and it's like this for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is that we're on top of granite, and granite drains very, very poorly. We've also got quite high rainfall in this part of the world, although you wouldn't think it right at the moment. It's been really dry, but we are relatively damp down here. So the combination of poor drainage and high rainfall leads to a very wet, waterlogged soil that can't drain away, and in those conditions you get the build-up of peat, and this soil is dark because it's peaty. Peat is basically unrotted vegetable material, unrotted down plant, and you build up a layer of this unrotted plant material. Now it also, because it can't rot down completely, it's almost like a pickling process, and it becomes quite acidic. And granite, actually, when granite breaks down, that adds to the acidity as well. So the answer in the soil is that it's acidic. It's wet and it's acidic. It's moorland, but it's low down. So what do we call it? I think we call it perhaps Maritime Heath, or the Penwith Moors. It doesn't matter, does it? Oh look, bilberry here. Now, another feature is the fact that we haven't got trees everywhere. I don't think it was always like this. I think this is the sign of activity by humans compounded by the fact that we are actually in quite an exposed area, so trees do find it a little bit tricky to get established. But if you look, you see the signs of woodland all over the place. Bluebells, wood anemones, we've got bilberry, a whole range of plants which you normally would find in woodland, and of course some trees around the place. So I think what we're looking at, well, I know that what we're looking at is a landscape that has been cleared of trees by humans, and then over the years the combination of the soil, the exposure from the coast and human activity has maintained these heaths or moors. It's known in ecological terms as a plagioclimax, a habitat that is maintained by the actions of humans. And so for hundreds of years the moors have been grazed, they've been burnt, they've been cleared, and that maintains this heathland. So what's likely to happen in the future of Penwith? Well, agriculture maintains the farmland, particularly in the lower areas. And what about these higher areas? Well, as you can see, woodland scrub wants to come in, the heathland would eventually turn into woodland. And then there's a very interesting question that we have to face in the future, because heathland is very rare. This habitat, this bracken, heather, gorse habitat, internationally is very important, and so it's protected. But also, in the view of our changing climate, woodland is very effective at locking up carbon. It's also fantastic for biodiversity. So we have to ask ourselves the question of how we're going to manage the habitats, and how do we want Penwith to look in the future. And I think I'm going to leave that for another day. Thanks for listening.